I've been wondering something for over 40 years now. In the late 1970s, I wrote my first letter to the editor. I was either in junior high or high school. I was rolling newspapers in a gas station bathroom one morning, about to begin my paper route, and there was a story in my local paper about the U.S. Supreme Court. And in that story, some members were referred to as ultra-conservative, but no member was referred to as ultra-liberal. It seemed then and now that the extremists, according to the political writers, could only be on the right. This week I read stories coming out of Italy with great interest. Their new leader, Giorgia Meloni, was called far-right and hard-right more than anything else this week. Of course she was the first woman chosen to lead Italy, but that was buried. Apparently it's only historic if the other side does it. What the media really wanted you to know was she was, quote, hard right or, quote, far right. And that had me wondering, who gets to decide what is left, right, or center? To say someone is hard or far right means you know where right is. And to know where right is, you have to know where the center is. So who gets to decide that? To many, Kamala Harris was a far or hard left senator. But not according to the media. They never referred to her that way. The media even tried to convince us that President Biden was a moderate. Compared to what? Compared to whom? The media also told us Amy Coney Barrett was a devout Catholic, but in a bad way, while Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi were devout Catholics, but in a good way. Says who? According to what measurement? Political writers? Is that who we're supposed to look to for the definition of left, right, center, and devout? When you read that someone is far right or hard right, maybe they are. But to know that, you have to know where the center is. Who gets to define that? If a candidate or elected official is far right, why are liberal politicians never described as far left? If you win an election in a country, that tells me you must hold a majority or a solid plurality of support. So if a country supports you, can you be hard right? Because it seems like you're pretty squarely in the middle of at least what that country wants you to be. The truth is, the New York Times doesn't have a clue what conservatism is, what conservatives believe, or why. To them, everything on the right is far right. And if they think Joe Biden is a moderate, they have no clue where the center is either. It's been 40-something years since I sat in that cold gas station bathroom rolling newspapers wondering why there were ultra-conservative judges on the bench, but not ultra-liberal ones. All the pejoratives are saved for conservatives. Only we, apparently, can be far or hard, never the left. My guess is we don't need a far-left, ultra-liberal newspaper or commentator or reporter telling us where the center of this country is, because they hadn't seen the center of this country since I was a kid sitting at that gas station. Joining us now is Hoover Institute Senior Fellow Victor Davis Hanson. Welcome back, Professor. Thank you for being here. Why is there only a hard or far right, but never a hard or far left, according to the media?
You got to start with the premise, Trey, that the left feels they're morally superior because they believe in forced egalitarianism, using the power of government to make everybody equal, not on the front end of opportunity, but on the back end. But they also realize that's contrary to human nature, contrary to common sense, and it requires a degree of force to force people that's contrary to our Constitution and what people will put up with. So they don't trust democracy. They don't trust 51%. They don't believe that their ideas on energy or inflation or the border are going to ever win 51%. And so what they do is they go to institutions, and especially in the onset of globalization, the biggest money in America for the last 30 years has been on the left. And they have systematically added to their control of the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, LA Times, NPR, PBS. Now they control social media. They control Hollywood, of course. They control K through 12. They control academia. They even control Wall Street and the corporate boardroom. And they feel that even though they don't have the majority of support among the population, and even though their message kind of repels people because they've seen what happens in history, whether from the French Revolution to the Bolsheviks, what happens when you try to force people to be equal and you use government to do it. They have confidence that they can change the language and they can message and they can advertise and they can entertain and they can use professional sports to get that message across. So they are always going to be enlightened, disinterested, empirical, empathetic. And the people who believe in human nature are always going to be selfish, right-wing, and that's how it is. And Republicans are sort of live and let live. Conservatives, traditionalists, they sort of say, you know, I'm not going to 360 degrees, 24/7 obsess on this because I have confidence in people, and they're sort of like us, and they kind of are commonsensical, and in the end, they'll come around. And some Republicans feel, you know, we'd rather lose nobly than win ugly. So that's the asymmetry, and they have a lidless eye, 24/7, 306. They are intent because deep down they don't have confidence in constitutional government or democracy because it would reflect the will of the people, and their message does not appeal to 51% of the people.
You know, Professor, I got a lot of challenges, including direction, so I do struggle with left and right, but I know that if I don't know where the center is, then I don't have a clue where left and right would be. Who is your answer the same if I were to say, who gets to decide where the center is? I mean, to know where left and right is, you have to know where the center is. Is that the same, folks? I mean...
Well, you and I believe that there's an absolute value, that there is a center that is centered on the Constitution as we know it and as was handed down. And we know what the Constitution is, and that is the center. And those on the right who would want to, you know, change it and make it, you know, for aristocratic purposes, are those on the left that would like to make it a social. So we know what the center is, but they're not absolutists. They don't believe it. They're relativist. So you've already seen them move. So now it's normal is getting rid of the Electoral College. It's why do we have 2 senators in each state when they only represent small populations in Idaho or Wyoming? Why don't we get rid of the filibuster? Why don't we bring in 2 states? Why don't we pack the court? Because on any given day, it's all relative and it's about power. And they know that they can't appeal to people on these issues. So we get these psychodramas, Trey. I mean, we had the January 6th insurrection, then we had the walls are closing in Trump raid, and then the bombshell Phantom of the Opera Biden speech, and then we intersplice them with just Jussie Smollett or Duke lacrosse and volleyball or Covington kids. But anything other than dispassionately right down the center, look at the Constitution, discuss issues, and they don't have confidence in that process because who in the world believes that an open border is going to work? Who believes 8% inflation is not inflation? Who believes that you should, you know, obsess on race after this history we had and this progress we've made? Who believes you would shut down the fossil fuel energy entire industry when we were the biggest natural gas and oil producer in the world, and with all the benefits that accrued from it? So they have an agenda that they know won't be popular unless they distract people, and one of the reasons they do it is what you've been talking about with language. They don't want the center. The center would allow free debate on both sides. They want to move it way to the left.
Victor Davis Hanson, thank you so much. When I have you back, we can talk about relativism because I think it's going to be the death of this experiment in self-governance. Thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday night.
Me too. Thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.